Welcome once again. Now, former President Olusegun Obasanjo recently sat down with New Central TV, giving exclusive insights into the debt relief efforts, foreign reserve growth, and fiscal policies during his tenure from 1999 to 2007. Now, with Nigeria facing substantial economic challenges in 2024, Obasanjo's reflections serve as both a look back and a cautionary tale for the nation's current leaders. To provide further insights, we'll be speaking with Devoe Okorie, who's a political and public affairs analyst. But first, let's listen to what the former president had to say about the state of Nigeria's economy when he took office and how he navigated the debt crisis.
I don't think it's that African leaders have forgotten what is going on in Sudan. I believe it's dereliction of duty and responsibility. When I came in 1999, I met $3.7 billion in reserve. And as I've told you, we were spending $3.5 billion to service debt. That's all we had. At the same time, the reserve that was 3.7 went to $45 billion. At the same time, we had what we called excess crude. This is the amount that is in excess between what we budgeted, that we will sell the crude oil, and what we actually sell it. We had around $25 billion. Between 2007 and 2024, all that amount of money had gone, all of it. Not only that, all the money they made during that period had gone. And today, we owe more than we owed when I came to government in 1999. Why? Poor leadership, poor management of economy, corruption galore, pervasive corruption, which of course is also part of poor leadership.
And now joining us now is Devoe Okorie, political and public affairs analyst. Devoe, many thanks for joining us. I mean, after hearing President Obasanjo's, former President Obasanjo's remarks, he spoke of inheriting a debt overhang of $36 billion and managing to reducing it to around $3.5 billion by the time he left office in 2007. Now, this achievement was coupled with a boost in Nigeria's foreign reserves to about $45 billion. I have to ask, right, what does this reveal about the fiscal policies and the priorities of that era? Do you think that these decisions have impacted Nigeria's long-term economic stability?
Thank you for having me once again. The first thing I'll say, I think, is because the question was put to Obasanjo, what you're putting to me now, I think is the most excruciating thing to live through your success being completely tanked. He gave clear examples of how he met a bad situation of heavy indebtedness and how they were able to more or less offset the debt by 90%, okay? From the about 50 billion that was being owed at that time. And then also in terms of GDP, they grew it by, if you look at the external reserves, from about 3.5 billion to about 45 billion when they left. And just to get to today's time, when it's a complete reversal, we're actually more indebted than we were as of the time when Obasanjo took out the fiscal reforms that actually led to the debt relief from the then creditors, the Paris Club. Now our indebtedness is ranging somewhere around $100 billion plus. And it just shows that we've completely messed up what should have been done. And when I say we, it's 17 years after. How many administrations is that? It's just been a complete spiral downwards. And that hasn't shown that we have been able to, I wouldn't call it have a grasp of what to do, because I think we know what to do. But we just continue collectively refusing to do what is right for our economy. We continue, despite advisory both from local people and even from international bodies, we continue doing the wrong thing. As you know, remember when he thought, as he stated in his in the interview, that when he saw the heavy burden of the indebtedness and how that was depressing the economy, the currency, we really couldn't move forward. As they say, the person who is indebted is a slave to his creditor. He had to do something about it. And in discussing with the creditors, what they were looking to see was not so much because, as he said, that they owed us any favors. You collected the money. The question here is, if you want some level of relief or forgiveness on what you owe, I need to see that you have taken steps to be able to get your act together, taken steps that will ensure that there's fiscal probity, there's fiscal strategy in terms of plugging some of the leakages, which was where the ICPC and the EFCC were created to ensure that we met up to some international parameters to be able to invite the environments that would allow the creditors to forgive that heavy indebtedness. So there's really not much to say in terms of finger pointing. We just have not done what is needful to be able to get us on the path of economic growth and prosperity.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to come back to analyzing our economic policies and, how governments, have taken us from a $570 billion economy to a $250 billion economy. Currently, maybe the fourth, in Africa. We're going to come back to that. But there's people who watch that interview, and every time that we see from President Olusegun Obasanjo, it's pretty much a common criticism where they say he has no right to tell anybody how to govern. He contributed, to the mess that we're in. Yes, he might have, reduced our debt, in his time, but, there was still corruption. There was still, some level of government high-handedness. He, of course, saw a government that had 570, it was the #1 economy in Africa, and he, at that time, tore his PDP membership, and said, wasn't supporting Goodluck Jonathan anymore. And, of course, led to the emergence of former President Muhammadu Buhari that eventually tanked our economy. So would you agree with, or would you understand the criticism, from those people who say former President Obasanjo should, has no right or moral compass to criticize any other government in Nigeria, seeing the role that he played?
Most times when there's political opinions, we need to look at who's speaking. And most times it's coming from those who are playing politics amongst themselves. But if you want to have a genuine conversation on whether President Olusegun Obasanjo has the right to speak on the economy, he does, because he's been in that seat twice. And if you count apples for apples in terms of how the country fared, as you can see in his own interview, he gave you parameters. You need to ask those who are talking. They need to give you the parameters of administrations after his own administration. And if we look back, we can generally see that even though there were faults, even though, of course, no one is perfect, and there were many, many faults in his government, the economy fared better in his time. Literally, there was growth, okay? Now, whenever there's growth, it means somebody somewhere is doing something right. That's what you need to measure if you want to make it a simple argument. Now, when you review the political progress that was made, maybe at that point you can begin to say, okay, well, even though he didn't speak to the fact that he contributed to looking for a third term, he said he wasn't interested. But I think some of us know the better part of that history and what happened with the National Assembly. So I can agree with those. If you're speaking from a political point of view, maybe he really didn't contribute to building the democracy as he would have loved it. However, in terms of governance and economic handling, no, it's a clear evaluation that this country was actually run better and fared better and grew during the time when he handled the country. And those are the key lessons that we need to learn.
Yeah, well, another key point that he made was his criticism of the current administration, and he says that they came in without a plan. And I have said this, in previous conversations, where I ask, is the government overwhelmed or underprepared? From President Obasanjo seems to believe that this government, was underprepared. They didn't have a plan. They basically just had, the only plan was to, how to take over power. Do you agree with that? Or are we seeing a situation where the government has come in and is overwhelmed with the amount of, issues that it needs to fix?
Okay, for you to make a categorical statement about today, you need to also look into history, okay? And what I simply mean by that is the Tinubu-Shettima-led administration. Can anyone say that they're unprepared? I mean, you're referring to an ex-two-time governor and also a senator in the National Assembly, and also a party leader within the country. You're referring to a two-time governor in terms of the VP. If you look at his administrations, they're not new to the table. It's not as if they even had the Buhari years to learn. That's if to say you're speaking at the federal level of operation. The point is, there's a question that Judith asked about Obasanjo when he left, what they were able to do and what we have now. Clearly, we lost values. We stopped doing what we know how to do. Okay, we stopped doing the needful to get the right results. So what has happened is it's just same with this administration. Of course, they had a plan. I mean, they read the manifesto to us. But are they executing as they have said? Are they executing as they have promised? Tinubu said we shouldn't pity him that he was prepared for the job. He knew what he was asking for, right? He even brought an essay on ministerial performance. Right now, they just did a cosmetic change of ministerial cabinet, which shows you, before I say which shows you, the people they changed were not even where the strategic problems lied, like economics, like defense, like the police, like the economy, like agriculture. They didn't touch those ones. That's where the problem lies, where the issues for growth and development in this country lie. They didn't touch those ones. So are you trying to tell me they're not aware? They're fully aware. So at some point, we have to take responsibility for the actions or the inactions that we take. That is the truth about judgment. It's not about sentiment. It's not about politicking or politicking. It's not even about which side are you on. If you don't do the needful, I have to say, the two economic reforms that Obasanjo criticized in terms of them making announcements without planning, I'm not sure exactly that that's the right way to put it. I think they made two brilliant economic policies in terms of the removal of subsidy and the harmonization of FX, but they have not followed through with the necessary steps to ensure that those policies begin to shift the country forward and move the economy in a direction that you would see that there's growth at the end of the tunnel. That's the fiscal strategy. We don't hear much about the fiscal strategy. We hear a lot of the monetary policies, interest rates, going NPR meetings up and down, which most Nigerians have no business or even understand. But the fiscal strategy, which is basically how are we going to use the little that we have to get more out of what we want to develop into, we don't hear from that. And that sits squarely on the coordinating minister of the economy and the minister of finance, who reports to the presidency, who also has the National Economic Council to guide and to advise. So if we're failing, let's admit it, let's own it. And if there are corrections to be made, because it's never a hopeless situation, as you can see, Obasanjo met a bad situation, he was able to fix it. Hence, I think today's administrations need to take the same lessons and fix the steps that they have taken.
Let's take a look at another excerpt from that interview, and this time he was talking about the current economic trajectory. Take a look.
I don't think it's that African leaders have forgotten what is going on in Sudan. I believe is dereliction of duty and responsibility. That's the way I would put it. And maybe that, and I add to it what I said earlier, deficit of real good leaders in Africa as at today. I don't say there are no good leaders at all.
Yeah. There's, aspects of, the conversation, I think that's what we should have shared as instead, where he's talking about the depletion of our, foreign reserves and
the likes, and just basically Nigeria's current economic trajectory and the missed opportunities for sustainable growth. Devoe, what measures do you think Nigeria's leadership then should prioritize, right? Because you said that he met a bad situation and he turned it, right? But others would argue that there's a difference between that time and now 2024. Even 4 years ago, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, times have changed. We've seen volatility in global oil market and prices. There's a lot of pitfalls as well. The entirety of the globe is facing some sort of shocks post-pandemic. So how best is that, how do they need to prioritize and the importance of diversifying our revenue sources?
Even though you've asked for free advisory, we will give it as a matter of national service. The truth is, what Obasanjo did was he had a fiscal plan that he followed, okay? There was a debt situation, okay? And what they did was they put in reforms, okay, by creating two financial investigative institutions, the ICPC and the AFCC, that were meant to fight those who were creating leakages within the country, okay? Because as you can see across the years, Nigeria has received both internal income, revenue. We've also had foreign direct investment. We've also had foreign portfolio investment. What has happened is that a lot of that has been filtered away. Most times when you read the budget at the beginning of the year, by the time you look, we're talking about a new budget. Most times we don't discuss what happened with the old budgets. We hear maybe a figure of budget performance, but we don't discuss the quality or the effectiveness. Now, it's not that difficult. The fiscal plan is just a roadmap as to how we're going to get out of this rot. And might I say, for those who understand a little bit of finance, you don't always have to borrow yourself out of the debt situation that you're in. Because from IMF to the World Bank to multilateral bodies that have lent Nigeria money, that is not the only form of fundraising. Nigeria is one of the few countries in this world that is blessed with natural resources, okay? Now, what happens is that just like you heard the NNPC and the Minister of Petroleum telling you that at some point when Nigeria could not cough up the dollars to buy imported fuel, what were they doing? They were trading crude barrels, okay? That's what they call swapping or under recovery. It's basically the same thing. They used what they had naturally, and they use that as payment. It's like a form of barter, trade by barter. So what do we have in this country as a whole? We have resources. So at some point, we need to start discussing how are we going to maximize and optimize the human resource that we have in this country. What you hear is normally people jackfiring. At what point are Nigerians, is the government going to start looking at how, if we have so many people, there are some countries in this world, just like Nigeria, with the same population, Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, who the country has a national strategy on their human resource, okay? Secondly, we have solid minerals and resources. 44 states in Nigeria have solid minerals in commercial quantity. Commercial quantity means you have enough for yourself and you can make revenue on it, both internal income as well as FX. That's when you sell it abroad, you export. Now, even if you don't have the money to develop those industries, just like in the oil and gas industries, you go into joint ventures, okay? You go into what we call public-private partnerships, where the government gives an enabling environment legislated by the National Assembly, and the private sector players inject the necessary income required, and then they're given a long period to make their money back.
All right.
This is when you start discussing equities, and basically, this is how we're going to get out of it, because we cannot borrow ourselves to death, neither can you tax Nigerians to death. we're already, I don't think there's any belto left in the belt anymore. We're already down, and you had promised you would not choke us, but we seem to be choked at this point in time.
All right. Devoe Okorie, thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your thoughts with us. We look forward to speaking with you again. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.